video I will be asking Chat GPT the following questions. What is the meaning of serious adverse effects of special interests? So that's the term that is used for the adverse effects caused by the COVID vaccines, specifically during the phase 3 safety trials. What are the requirements for becoming a test subject for Pfizer and Moderna vaccine test trials? Is the risk of serious adverse effects among the general population greater than the risk among test subjects? Was there indeed a huge increase in the number of vaccine-related adverse effects reports in 2021? Were the receivers of COVID-19 injections properly asked for informed consent? And do the benefits of the COVID-19 booster shots outweigh their risks? Well, hello. This time we will be chatting with the AI application Chat GPT about the safety and efficacy of the COVID vaccines. If you look at what is available about AI, artificial intelligence, in YouTube today, there's a lot of discussion about all the threats and some discussion about all the possibilities, the positive possibilities that artificial intelligence gives us. When I ask ChatGPT about some sensitive issues regarding the safety of vaccines, you often get replies that don't directly address your question, but it's almost like ChatGPT starts lecturing about how important it is to consult medical professionals every time you have some concerns about medical drugs or procedures. However, it's still interesting what we can find out, and we'll start with this issue about the safety trials. And my question for ChatGPT was like this. In the third stage medical trials of the COVID-19 vaccines in 2020, before the vaccines were marketed, Pfizer and Moderna were keeping record of serious adverse effects of special interests. Is this correct? And if so, how do you define such effects? And there's lots of general arguments and introductions typically, but here is the example of such adverse effects: severe allergic reactions, anaphylaxis, blood clotting disorders, or other serious medical events. This seems to be rather a short list of possible adverse reactions, but as it turns out very soon, ChatGPT didn't and doesn't have the accurate data about the phase 3 trials. And this is apparently because, as it often reminds you, that its database is based on information up to September 2021, and the information about the phase 3 vaccine trials was not publicly available at that time. And what is an important bit of this response is here it is important to emphasize that the clinical trial process is designed to ensure that vaccines and other medical interventions are safe and effective. The collection and evaluation of adverse events, including serious adverse effects of special interest, are critical components of this process to provide reliable data to regulatory agencies and the public to make informed decisions about the use of vaccines, and specifically the last part of this long sentence, for the public to make informed decisions. Let's make a note of that. Vaccine safety surveillance systems remain in place to identify and respond to any unexpected safety concerns that may arise once the vaccine is widely used. So this is another thing to make a note of, that is important to continue the surveillance of vaccine safety throughout the vaccine campaigns. And then obviously it indicates that the policies need to be updated if some new information comes out that changes the risk-benefit analysis of the product. According to these safety trials executed by Pfizer and Moderna, serious adverse effects occurred in 1 out of 800 test subjects when the trials of both companies are combined. This is a fact that is based on the actual data from the Pfizer and Moderna information, and this has been addressed by many professional people. Is this correct? Now, at this point, Chat GPT reveals that it doesn't have the information to reply this question, and then my follow-up comment goes like this: fair enough, this data about the safety trials was published after September 2021. To become a test subject for those companies in these trials, what were the requirements concerning the subject's age and health? Again, in the beginning there's this general jargon, but then we come to the different points that typically enrolled adults were 18 years or older, and in some cases there were people that were older than 64, so 65 and above. So this indicates that mostly it was people between 18 and 64. And now pay attention to these points and how they affect the likelihood of the test subjects having serious adverse effects of special interest as compared to the general public. Second point, participants were generally required to be in good health or have stable chronic medical conditions. Third point, no prior COVID-19 infection. That is not such a big deal, but most likely a prior COVID-19 infection also would increase the risk of adverse reactions rather than decrease them. 4. No history of severe allergic reactions. Now, just recently, Chat GPT said as an example of serious adverse reactions, severe allergic reactions. So, isn't it again clearly more likely or less likely for the test subjects to have serious allergic reactions compared to the general public, because they have no history of severe allergic reactions. And then the final point is diversity, that they trials aim to include a diverse range of participants, providing that the other points were met. And then we proceed to the next question. As that is the situation, whatever was the number of serious adverse effects that occurred in those trials, isn't it most likely that the number of such effects among the general public must have been substantially larger, particularly because of the following reasons. 1. In the general public, also people with multiple medical problems and allergies are included. 2. People with medical issues are most common among the elderly, and the elderly people were prioritized as receivers of the vaccines, but not at all prioritized as the test subjects for testing the safety of the vaccines. 3. Each generation of the COVID-19 vaccines were first administered to risk groups, and people counted as members of these groups are particularly vulnerable. So now I have highlighted some points. Chat GPT thanks me for raising valid points, which is good, because these points are definitely valid and very logical. Again, there are several bullet points here, and we begin with the first one here. Once the vaccines are administered to millions of people, there's a wider range of individual health conditions, genetics and lifestyles, which can influence how people react to the vaccine. I didn't even think about lifestyles affecting this. So apparently the test subjects in the trials, because they were generally healthy, they probably also had rather healthy lifestyles. Obviously, Chat GPT here verifies that it is more likely for the people among the millions, the general public, to have serious adverse effects because they are people with multitude of health conditions, whereas in the test group they were very exceptionally healthy people. And the second point, the general public includes individuals with various underlying health conditions which might increase the risk of certain adverse effects. Basically, this is just continuing the same point that was discussed just before. And then the third, vaccines are eventually administered to people of all ages, including the elderly and those with pre-existing health conditions. Elderly individuals and those in high-risk groups might have a different response to the vaccine compared to younger and healthier participants in clinical trials. And again, might have is a rather cautious way of putting it, but apparently they are more likely to have serious adverse effects, as they are more likely to have serious symptoms and serious implications from the COVID disease itself. I'll skip the fourth point at this point. Now we are mostly looking at the situation of the original variant just after the following month, the following spring, after the introduction of the vaccines. Okay, so my camera ran out of battery when I was doing that previous recording, and now it's been a few days and I continue. In point 5 it says that real-world data collection is often less rigorous than in clinical trials. And the 6th point, adverse effects in the general public might be underreported or not immediately linked to the vaccine. At least it indicates that the records we have of adverse effects in the actual situation when the vaccines are rolled out, the number of adverse effects is actually much higher than the statistics would show. So it is quite apparent to expect more vaccine adverse reactions in the general public than during the clinical trials, the safety trials. And here is the graph for the what was the VAERS system in USA. This is deaths that are reported as a consequence of a vaccine injection. And now, of course, not all deaths are reported in connection with vaccines are actually caused by the vaccines. But then again, the same applies also to the other vaccines, not just the COVID vaccines. And then again, not all deaths caused by vaccines are reported. But we still get the idea from the huge difference in these numbers. There were 3.34 times more adverse effects related deaths reported due to COVID-19 vaccines in 20 to 22 than due all other vaccines during these more than 30 years. And in 21 there were 35.6 times more adverse effect related deaths reported due to COVID-19 vaccines than due to all other vaccines. And now we're going to my next question. As soon as September 2021 in USA, it is stated that the number of reported adverse effects to the COVID vaccines outnumbered the combined number of adverse effects caused by all previous vaccines over the previous 30 years. Is this statement correct? And if not, how do the adverse effects of COVID vaccines as recorded by a VAERS system in the USA differ from all adverse effects to all vaccines since 1991? And now it turns out that AI, Chat GPT, doesn't have access to the VAERS data. And then I ask it, how is it that you don't have access to VAERS data from the first half of 2021, because it's supposed to have information all the way up to September 21, when the VAERS information from the first 6 months of 21 was publicly available. And it's assessed that my knowledge is based on the information available up until my last update in September 21, and I don't have the capability to browse the internet or access data beyond that point. Concerning informed consent, now we are moving to the next question. According to the information available to you, were the receivers of the initial COVID vaccines in late 2020 and early 21 generally informed about the risk-benefit ratio, which was known to health authorities based on the phase 3 trials, and assigned consent to participate in the trial of an experimental product that had only received an emergency authorization? And what we hear as an answer from Chat GPT is very, very interesting. Again, it gives this same story about not having the information beyond September 21. However, based on the information available up to September 21, I can provide some general insights into the informed consent process during the initial COVID-19 vaccine rollout in late 2020 and early 21. For vaccines authorized under emergency use during that period, informed consent procedures were in place to ensure that individuals receiving the vaccines were provided with appropriate information regarding the risks and benefits. Listen to this. The informed consent process typically includes, now it's like a generalization, but obviously the indication is that this sort of procedure should be in place in any time a new medical product is introduced and given to people. First, the individuals were informed that the COVID-19 vaccines had received emergency use authorization from regulatory authorities, which means they had undergone rigorous testing for safety and efficacy, but had not yet completed all stages of the standard approval process. Now, anybody who took the first and the first two COVID vaccines, or who was offered and maybe refused to take them, were you informed about these things? That is, it is still going through stages of a standard approval process, and were you informed about the risks and benefits of the vaccines? Which is more in the second point, that while the vaccine safety and efficacy were demonstrated in these trials, there were still uncertainties and ongoing evaluations. According to AI, the individuals receiving this medication, they should have given the information that there are still uncertainties regarding the safety and efficacy of the vaccines. Were you given that information? And even if you were, do you believe that everybody was given that information? The third point, voluntary participation. Individuals were free to decide whether they wanted to receive it or not after being fully informed. So think about the general situation in January, February, March 21 and even later, where people are queuing, like hundreds or thousands of people are queuing for the vaccines and eager to have them as soon as they are available. That can you imagine that each individual was given all that information described before, and then also informed that you are free to decide whether you want it or not? Wasn't it actually quite often there quite a strong pressure to take the vaccine and not to have so much freedom to actually decide without having some negative consequences from declining the vaccine? Individuals were given the opportunity to ask questions and seek clarification about the vaccines and the informed consent process. Again, I don't know if they really were able to provide sufficient time for people to ask questions when the next person and hundreds and thousands of people were in the, queuing in the line. And even signing consent forms. In many vaccination settings, individuals were required to sign consent forms, and now this is no longer a generalization. This is referring directly to this particular vaccine campaign of 21, the COVID vaccines, indicating that they had been informed of the risks and benefits and had agreed to receive the vaccine. According to my knowledge, what I've heard from people, they were not given any consent forms to sign, so that they have verified they have received the information of the risks and benefits, the risk of adverse reactions, etc. And then AI continues to say the informed consent process is a fundamental ethical requirement in medical research and vaccination campaigns, ensuring that individuals are empowered to make informed decisions about their health. It is a crucial aspect of maintaining transparency, trust, and accountability in healthcare practices. Now that sounds so nice, so beautiful, so human, so ethical. And shouldn't we all agree that this is the way how it should go? But did it go this way with the COVID-19 vaccines? And finally, we're going to the practical, the actual risk-benefit situation in later, at the time when the boosters were administered. My question starts like this. In early 2023, an official publication from UK Health Security Agency, UKHSA, stated the following. And now this is from a video by John Campbell, who's done loads and loads of videos about COVID and the vaccines and related issues. Very good videos, lots of them. And he provides, if you're interested, he provides all the documents. This is actually official government information, the UK government. And this is an example of the information that he was giving. In order to prevent one hospitalization due to COVID-19 in the age group of 50 to 59, one needs to vaccinate 43,600 individuals with the booster shot. This is the third dose. This is referred to as the number needed to vaccinate NNV. A few weeks earlier, the National Library of Medicine published a reanalysis of the Pfizer and Moderna phase 3 vaccine trials, particularly concerning the frequency of serious adverse effects of special interests. In the case of Moderna, 1 in 662 vaccines doses produce these adverse effects. For Pfizer, the same figure was 1 in 990. Combined, this gives 25.5 cases of serious adverse effects of special interest for every 10,000 doses given, and that's translate to 1 in 800. So this, I already talked about this. This is the calculation how this figure was reached. As you don't have information beyond September 21, you can and you must take this as a hypothetical example. Considering our previous discussion, the true frequency of these adverse effects must have been, in this case, in the age group of 50 to 59, at least 1 in 600, especially since the booster shots had more effective ingredients than the original 2 doses. If indeed only 1 out of 43,600 vaccinated individuals end up hospitalized due to COVID-19, but 1 out of 600 or even 800 develop serious adverse effects, commonly leading to hospitalization as suggested by the definition of these adverse effects of serious interest, special interests. What does this tell about the risk-benefit analysis of the booster vaccine? Should it still be recommended for this age group? Should the receiver at least be aware of the risk-benefit ratio in order to establish informed consent, which is required for a medicine still going through the final safety trial phase. These were the questions that John Campbell was also asking in the video. He was asking the audience. He was through the videos maybe asking it from the authorities. But now I'm asking these questions with these same numbers from AI, and let's see what AI replies. Now I've skipped the first two replies because I've just written here my the repeats of the questions I give, because the AI was going round the question. It was starting to give this kind of small lectures about how you can decide whether medical information is correct or not, or that the AI doesn't have this and that information, and etc. So I had to ask twice more, and in my last question I repeated the numbers. Surely the booster shot should be very effective for the benefits to outweigh the risks. Can you estimate how high the efficacy of the vaccine should roughly be in preventing a severe illness in order for it to outweigh the risks? And finally, the AI gave a direct answer to the question. So twice it tried to go round the question, but eventually it gave the answer. And this is alone a very interesting feature of Chat GPT, that you might ask a certain question and it makes a kind of a diversion, and often the person asking the questions might not notice that it was doing this kind of diversion and would proceed to the next question. But you can actually see that you can ask the same question several times until you get an accurate reply to your question. I don't know whether this only applies to sensitive topics like the safety of medication, where it seems that there are some specific coding included in the AI application to be more rigorous in defining whether what's the correct way to answer, or as we've seen, to kind of go around the question. So now the third time it gives a very straightforward answer with accurate numbers and accurate calculations. And I'll skip that. You can read it if you like, but it comes to the conclusion that the efficacy of the booster shot should be approximately 800 times higher than the risk of serious adverse effects to outweigh the risks in this hypothetical scenario. For AI, it is hypothetical because it doesn't have information from 22 and 23. This means that the booster shot should reduce the risk of severe illness due to COVID-19 by around 800 times compared to the risk of experiencing serious adverse effects from the vaccine. But it had already been shown by the numbers, the statistics, the official UK statistics, that you need to vaccinate almost 45,000 people to prevent one hospitalization by COVID-19. Doesn't it really tell that the vaccine cannot be 800 times more efficient than the risk of serious adverse reactions?
After recording this video, some new information has turned up. The Pfizer COVID vaccines delivered to the public in 2021 were not manufactured with the same process as those used in the safety trials. The process was changed, and the vaccine manufactured with the new process were only tested with a handful of people. Basically, then people were not getting the same product that was found safe and effective in the test trials. We won't be going into more details about this here, but you can find more information about this in the internet. According to Pfizer and Moderna safety trials, there were 12.5 serious adverse effects among 1,000 test subjects. The test subjects were exceptionally healthy with no history of allergic reactions and no underlying medical conditions. So let's suppose, just to get some kind of idea of how many adverse reactions we may have had in total, that among the public these reactions were 1.3 times more frequent. This should be quite a modest assumption. Let's further suppose that the adverse reactions were another 1.3 times more frequent because among the public it was particularly the elderly who were prioritized for vaccinations, and the elderly were mostly excluded from the trials. After these additions, we come up with 21 serious adverse effects among 1,000 injections. Let's round this down to 20. The previous estimation concerns the initial 2 doses of the vaccination program. The booster shots were mostly targeted to the elderly and to the risk groups, because they are significantly more vulnerable than the average people, and because the boosters were more effective than the original injections. It is fair to assume that serious adverse effects in the boosted population were at least twice as frequent than in the population that only received the initial doses. So that is generally the younger population. This means 40 serious adverse effects per 1,000 injections in this group. At the time of making this video, about 11 billion doses of the initial vaccine campaign had been administered worldwide. Almost 3 billion booster shots had been given. With 20 out of 1,000 initial doses and 40 out of booster doses leading to a serious adverse effect, this would mean a total of almost 35 million serious adverse reactions throughout the world. In Finland, my home country, this means 35,000 serious adverse reactions, and for example in USA, 1.5 million serious adverse reactions.